In the summer of 1964, the struggle for civil rights in the United States reached a small Atlantic shore town called St. Augustine, Florida. And in that place, something astonishing happened that would be replayed in newspapers and on television screens across the nation. For decades, St. Augustine had been a bastion of segregation, where restaurants, theaters, hotels, and even swimming pools were reserved exclusively for white people, and Black residents were forced to endure humiliation and exclusion. Civil rights organizers, including leaders from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and local activists, saw this as a strategic battleground. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself came to St. Augustine to support the campaign to dismantle racial barriers and insisted that every public place should be open to all citizens regardless of color. Among the many sites of protest was the Monson Motor Lodge, a prominent hotel whose swimming pool had become a symbol of the city's rigid segregation. In mid-June, peaceful demonstrators began staging swim-ins, where Black and white activists would simply walk into the whites-only pool and sit together, challenging the hotel's discriminatory policy with their bodies and their courage. On June 18, 1964, a group of protesters entered the pool as photographers and journalists gathered to document the scene. Among the assembled crowd was the hotel's owner and manager, James Brock, a man determined to uphold segregation and fight back against the mounting pressure for integration. Witnesses later described what happened next as both shocking and surreal. In full view of the protesters and news cameras, James Brock strode to the pool's edge with a container of muriatic acid, a common pool chemical used to lower pH, and began pouring it directly into the water while people remained inside. Contemporary journalists reported on this moment in real time, noting Brock's actions were intended to force the demonstrators out of the pool and maintain segregation at any cost. One account from the Civil Rights Digital Library quotes observers who were stunned that a hotel official would use a chemical assault in broad daylight, rather than engage in dialogue or allow equality under the law. Photographs of the scene, acid streaming into the pool and determined protesters refusing to leave, were published in newspapers such as the **St. Augustine Record **, and picked up by national wire services. Civil rights historian Taylor Branch wrote that the images became emblematic of the fierce resistance civil rights activists faced across the South. The protest at the pool did not end the segregation at the Monson that day, but it did change the narrative. Overnight, what had been a local confrontation became a national news story and a powerful symbol of the entrenched racism that the civil rights movement was fighting to uproot. The larger civil rights campaign in St. Augustine, including sit-ins, wade-ins in segregated fountains and beaches, and mass marches, contributed to building public pressure for federal action. Just months later, in July 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, outlawing discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in public accommodations across the country. Historians such as Claiborne Carson and organizations like the *SNCC Digital Gateway have cited the St. Augustine protests, and the pool incident in particular, as part of the context that made continued segregation politically and socially untenable. James Brock's decision to pour acid into the pool did not stop the movement. It fueled it. The images of that day remain preserved in archives including the * Civil Rights Movement, Archive **, and museum collections, reminding future generations not just of the cruelty of segregation, but of the courage of ordinary Americans who stood for justice, even when faced with hostility and danger. The Monson Motor Lodge itself changed ownership in later years, and today the site is part of historical memory rather than a place of exclusion. But the moment when a man in power chose chemicals instead of equality continues to be one of the most vivid and disturbing symbols of racial resistance in modern American history.